Ayo, what up, gamers? And today, I finally watched all of the Best Picture nominated movies for this Oscar season. So I'm going to be ranking you the top 10 Best Picture nominees, tier list ranking for you guys today. And this was a pretty solid year for the Oscars. There's only really two movies here that I didn't like. Everything else is a pretty solid pick by the Oscars here. So to start us off, my number 10 worst Best Picture film this year is The Zone of Interest. Yeah, this film was a real letdown for me because it had so much potential, but it really just shat the bed. This film follows a Nazi family in Nazi Germany that live right next to Auschwitz, I believe. The basic premise of this movie is to kind of challenge our understandings of what evil looks like. You know, we have this kind of cartoonish understanding of evil. We think of evil people as like the Joker, you know, psychotic and insane people that are fundamentally different from us. But in reality, a lot of, the most evil people are completely normal. Normal people are capable of evil. People like to think they're in the right, and your brain can do a lot of mental gymnastics to convince you that you're in the right, even when you are, living a completely degenerate life. We all think that we wouldn't have been Nazis in Nazi Germany, but statistically we would be wrong. Most of the people in Nazi Germany either supported the Nazis or were just indifferent to it, just were willing to be a bystander. So, normal people are capable of evil. The film kind of highlights how easy it is to just turn a blind eye to, horrors going on around you. There's scenes where the characters are just doing completely normal things, putting on their makeup as, screams. You can hear screams in the background from these people in the concentration camp, and it doesn't really faze them. They just keep going about their day. There's a scene where the main father character who works at the concentration camp is discussing with a few other Nazis about how they're going to go about constructing an oven. And they're talking about it very nonchalantly, as if this is like a pizza oven or something. But you as the viewer know this oven is going to be used to, incinerate corpses and turn them into ash. I really like kind of the themes and the overall sort of premise of the movie. But yet I didn't really enjoy it at all because it is so painfully boring. It is just nothing happens this entire movie at all. I'm struggling to remember a single thing that happened. It's really just so unbelievably boring. I can't even describe it. The first 10 minutes of this movie is just black. It's just like black, and there's some creepy music playing. I thought our projector was broken, but no, it's just an artistic choice to just wait for, 10 minutes of black. The movie just sucks. The movie gets its point across, in the first 20 minutes or so. There's nothing you're getting out of watching the full 3-hour movie that you wouldn't get out of just watching the first 20 minutes of the movie, other than just like filler bullshit of nothing happening. I just really hate this. I really hated this movie. Moving on to our number 9 movie, another movie that I didn't really like. We got Maestro. This is Bradley Cooper's first movie that he's directed, and it fucking sucks. The film is a biopic about this guy. I forget his name, but he is a maestro. He composes music, writes music. Eventually he sort of writes music for plays. I think he wrote the music for West Side Story or something. This is another one where it's just so boring. A lot of the conflict of the movie centers around this character kind of being bisexual. He's married to a woman and has a family, but he secretly, has sex with men on the side, and his wife knows about this. They have a kind of arrangement. But it's definitely a cause of conflict in the relationship. The mom is okay with what he does as long as he keeps it secret and no one ever finds out, but he's kind of, not low key enough with it. These rumors kind of start to spread, and it really kind of breaks the mother, makes her very angry. That's kind of the only interesting thing about the movie, was that dynamic between him and the wife character. But other than that, I really didn't enjoy anything about this movie. There's literally 15 minutes in this movie where we're just watching Bradley Cooper go like this, and you're supposed to be invested in what's happening. I'm like, I don't give a fuck about watching him compose music. This is just fucking sucks. The acting was pretty good in the movie. But yeah, this movie just really sucks. Now moving on to the movies that I actually liked, we got number 8, The Holdovers. This is kind of a very wholesome kind of movie. It stars Paul Giamatti as this, he's really just like the worst teacher ever. And he's a very bitter teacher. You can tell he doesn't like most of his students. We follow this kid who is not able to go home for the winter break because his mom went away with some lover to go skiing or something. I forget what they do. But yeah, he's basically held back, and he has to spend the winter break with Paul Giamatti's character. And the kind of crux of the movie is Paul Giamatti's character and this, other student character kind of growing to understand each other. Towards the beginning of the film, Paul Giamatti's character has this kind of notion that the students are all, privileged little shits, who, never had to struggle in their life and don't apply themselves. But through kind of interacting with this kid, he kind of realizes his preconceived notions were wrong. This kid has kind of a very troubled life. The student character finds out more about the teacher, sort of, and why he's so bitter, and more of his kind of background that makes him a more sympathetic character. And I think it was pretty well done, the kind of growth these two characters go through. They go on a lot of fun excursions together. The film is also kind of edited to make it look like a 80s movie. It's kind of a nostalgia bait movie. They have kind of effects on the screen that make it look more old-timey. And yeah, I'd say overall it's a pretty enjoyable watch, a pretty wholesome Christmas movie. I like the end, that you can see Paul Giamatti's character growth over the course of the movie by his decision at the end. Moving on to our number 7 pick here, we got Barbie. The new film based on the Barbie toys. And yeah, I did a review on this earlier in the year, and I did enjoy this film. This is kind of a comedy, satire film. I really liked that the company, Mattel, they really weren't afraid to make jokes at their own expense. There were a lot of jokes in this movie where my jaw kind of dropped. I'm like, how in the world did Mattel give them the pass to say that? They kind of make fun of the very concept of the Barbie toy, and they show kind of how the older generation views the Barbie toy and how the younger generation views it. The film starts off, we follow Margot Robbie as Barbie, and we start in Barbie Land. Which, by the way, the production design and the sets for Barbie Land is pretty crazy. They built all these, life-size Barbie houses. Later in the film, Barbie and Ken go to the real world. A lot of the humor and kind of social commentary in the movie centers around the juxtaposition between our world and the Barbie land. At the beginning of the movie, you kind of view this Barbie land as absurd. It's so silly and goofy how female-centric every single thing is in the society. And then when they go to the real world, they kind of highlight how our world is just as kind of male-centric as the Barbie land is female-centric. It was kind of funny to see it through Ken's eyes, because In the Barbie land, he's kind of just, an afterthought. No one really cares about men in the Barbie land. Then Ken comes to our world and he sees, oh my God, every president is a man, every CEO is a man. This is the greatest. And I think it was an ingenious way for the film to kind of get this idea of a patriarchy across without having to, preach at the viewer. I enjoyed a lot of the humor in this movie. There's one character in particular who's kind of meant to make fun of Zoomers. There's a scene where she's talking to Barbie and she's like, yeah, the Barbie toy is just white supremacist and fascist propaganda. I could see a real high schooler saying something like that. There's two kind of main characters from the real world, the Zoomer character that I just talked about and her mother, and they kind of show the differences in how these characters perceive the Barbie toy. The mother is coming from the old school perspective. She thinks the Barbie toy is great and it is empowering women, showing that women can, pursue careers and all these types of things. The daughter doesn't like the Barbie toy. She thinks, it's promoting unrealistic standards for women, unrealistic beauty standards. And eventually she kind of comes around to seeing her mother's perspective on it. I think it was kind of an interesting idea. They made it pretty realistic to how people actually do talk about the Barbie toy. The younger generation does have that kind of opinion. You can also tell that the director, Greta Gerwig, is a, pretty big film buff. There's a lot of sort of references to great films in here. The opening scene that you might have seen in the trailers is kind of a parody of 2001: A Space Odyssey. There's also a funny kind of reference to The Matrix later in the film. I did enjoy a lot of the various film references. I think that the comedy and the kind of social commentary, satire stuff lands a majority of the time in the film. There are a few cringe moments. There were a few jokes where I'm like, I was pretty sure the audience was fake laughing. There's a few jokes where it's just, there isn't a joke. It's just the character makes a reference to some sort of feminist or leftist, online term. And that's just supposed to be the joke. It's like, Ken just made a reference to white fragility. Is that funny? There's a few jokes where it's like, LOL, Barbie just used the phrase white savior or something. And it's like, that's not really a joke. Just because you're saying a word that I hear on Twitter, that's not a joke. And I think a lot of people were fake laughing just because, I've heard the term white savior on Twitter. That's a thing that I know. It'd be one thing if they kind of made a joke about sort of the concept of a white savior, or they make some sort of funny commentary, but no, the joke is just that she used the phrase white savior, and that's it. There's a kind of speech towards the end of the movie that gets a bit preachy. The character basically is just telling you kind of the point of the movie, like very, very in your face sort of manner. I mean, I can see some people thinking it's kind of cringe. And the film, is a feminist film, but I think they get the messaging across in kind of a non-offensive, agreeable way that I think anybody can enjoy this movie. Even if you're a virulent anti-feminist or something, I think you can still find enjoyment in this film. Moving on to our number 6 film, we got Anatomy of a Fall. This was a good movie. In this movie, we follow a family of a mother, father, and son who is blind, and the father falls or was pushed or something. Somehow he fell out of a window and died. And the death is a bit suspect. The mother was kind of the only person there when it occurred. So she is a suspect for murder and has to go through these, murder trials. We don't really know as the viewer what occurred. We kind of see things through the son's perspective. He goes out on a walk before the father's death, and then when he comes back, he finds the father on the ground bleeding dead. And I think the film does a good job of kind of selectively choosing which pieces of information to reveal that make you kind of going back and forth of, did she do it? Did she not? There was a few points in the movie where I kind of changed my perspective on whether I thought she did the murder or not. And even in the end of the movie, I think it's still kind of open-ended. They definitely are kind of leaning in a certain direction by the end of the movie, but I mean, I feel like you could still kind of argue either way, you know, whether she murdered him or not. The film really shows kind of the stress of the trial process. It kind of shows how, regardless of whether you're innocent or guilty, you know, you can still be pretty fucked by having to go through a trial. A lot of things are uncovered that probably never would have been had this not gone to trial. You know, her son is in the stands seeing the trial and finds out a lot of things about his mother that he did not know. I think the acting by both the son and the mother was very good. The mother, you can kind of see how this trial is slowly breaking her, and same with the son, especially because the son is very young. I think he's supposed to be like 11 years old or something, and he's having to, you know, wrestle with the fact that his mother may have murdered his father. You know, you can see how it's taking a toll on him. The son even kind of becomes the main character almost at the end of the movie. And yeah, his performance was really good. I was very invested in his character and his relationship with his mother. The film is also just very well written. A lot of the dialogue just seems very realistic to what would really happen in this type of situation. There's a kind of argument that we see between the couple that I think was very well written, very well acted. You could kind of see the struggle between, you know, the mother and the father. Overall, it is a really solid film. I would highly recommend it. I forgot to mention that I watched Anatomy of the Fall on Amazon Prime, and the subtitles are completely fucked up. If you go to the audio settings, it says the film is in English, but yeah, a large portion of the movie is in French, probably like half of the film. Even though it says the audio is in English, they don't put subtitles for the French portions. You either have no subtitles at all and can't understand any of the French stuff, or you have to have subtitles on for the entire film, including all of the English parts. It was very annoying. Moving on to number 5, we have Poor Things. I definitely enjoyed this film. This film, basically, we follow a mad scientist who does a lot of these wacky experiments, you know, putting dogs' heads onto chickens and various other kind of weird shit. The main character of the film is one of his experiments. I mean, this may be a minor spoiler, but basically he put a child's brain into an adult's body. And the center of a lot of the, you know, comedy and satire in this movie is kind of viewing the adult world from that childlike, you know, innocent perspective. A lot of times her kind of innocent child brain actually allows her to have some, you know, more reasonable perspectives on the world than the actual adults around her. There's a lot of humor kind of centered around the fact that the main character doesn't really understand that sex and sexuality is like a taboo subject. There's a scene where she's at this, you know, dinner table, and this woman tells this joke, and the joke is sort of an obvious innuendo. She's kind of making a joke about her man's penis. And the main character, with her kind of, you know, innocent child brain, she says, "Oh, you mean his penis?" And everyone is immediately made extremely uncomfortable. It was kind of funny how, you know, you can say innuendos where everyone is thinking the same thing in their head, but you can't actually say it out loud. It's pretty funny, the kind of nonchalant way in which the main character talks about sex. The film also kind of commentates on how men kind of want women that are, you know, kind of ignorant and childish and innocent, because they can kind of, you know, take advantage of them. You can see this through the Mark Ruffalo character. He kind of enjoys that she's, you know, a child and doesn't really know things because he can kind of control her. He's obsessed with, you know, her being a virgin and, you know, not having any experience sexually other than him. He even tells her, he's like, "I'm the best in the world at sex. You don't need to think about any other man than me. You just stay with me." And he's incredibly jealous of any other man that has her. He views her essentially as his kind of possession. And as she starts to like read more and become more educated and more adult, he doesn't like that. He gets very angry. He's throwing her books off the ship. And I think there is some truth to that kind of character. Also, the kind of visuals in the movie look pretty interesting as well. They go to a lot of different countries, and these backdrops you kind of see look very kind of surreal, almost kind of cartoonish, but not. Yeah, it was very kind of visually interesting. I also enjoyed Willem Dafoe's character as well. He was pretty funny as the mad scientist. Overall, I would recommend it. It's a very kind of surreal movie, very strange. But it's worth a watch. Moving on to our number 4 movie, we got Past Lives. And yeah, this is kind of a romance movie. The film follows this kind of Korean woman. It starts out with her as a child in Korea. There's this boy that is kind of, likes her. They both like each other. But then her family moves to America, and she kind of doesn't get to see this boy for a long time. Later, when they've both grown up, he kind of reconnects with her. They get into contact over these Skype calls. They kind of Skype each other consistently for a long period of time. They build this kind of emotional connection. But eventually the woman decides that they need to kind of stop these calls because they aren't going to be able to see each other in person. The male character, he wants to go to China to learn Mandarin. He's not going to be able to come to America for a long time. So they kind of cease these calls while still remaining friends. And we get kind of another time skip where a lot of time has passed and the woman is now married to another man that she met, and the man is sort of has a girlfriend, but he just recently broke up with her, and we realize he's kind of never stopped thinking about this main woman character. He's kind of obsessed with this idea of what could have been, if he decided not to go to China and had come to America, could he have started a life with her? And this kind of really eats at him. He eventually, comes to America to finally meet her in person. He claims that he's coming on a vacation, but really he's just coming to see her. The movie also really fleshes out the kind of American husband character as well. The film gets a bit meta in this one scene as well, where the American husband realizes, he says, if this was a romance film, this would be the part where you leave me, the evil white man, and go be with your, childhood sweetheart. And it was pretty funny because he was fulfilling that exact role at that point in the movie. The husband is kind of insecure because, the way they met wasn't, very romantic. They just kind of met at this writing retreat and got together basically just because, the opportunity was there. I mean, they don't have some crazy romantic story. Whereas with this, Korean guy, she has this kind of, very romantic, almost fairy tale-like backstory with him. The film kind of centers around the character's struggle with that, idea. I think a lot of the point of the movie is, there's not some sort of fantastical story to everything. A lot of times things just happen just because the opportunity is there, and that's fine. The film gets pretty sad, especially at the end. The film kind of explains how there's this Korean concept, basically kind of of reincarnation, where you see people from your past lives, and if you marry someone, that means you've they've been friends with you for hundreds of past lives. So the characters kind of tell themselves, okay, we can't really be together in this life, but in the next we can, be together maybe. And it's pretty sad. You can tell the characters don't really believe in this reincarnation thing, but it's just they have to tell themselves that just to cope. Yeah, it's a very, very kind of bittersweet movie at the end. But I think I thoroughly enjoyed it. There's a lot of movies that kind of, I would say, have a similar sort of concept to this one, but I think this one does it extremely well. Really good acting as well. I do have to complain about Amazon Prime again. They fucked up the subtitles for Past Lives as well, because half of this movie is in Korean and the other half English. And the audio settings do say English, and they do subtitle the Korean portions, but there are parts where they kind of forgot to put in the subtitles, and I had to go in and manually turn the subtitles on to understand what they were saying. It's not as bad as with Anatomy of the Fall, but they still did fuck it up. And moving on, number 3, we got Killers of the Flower Moon. The new Martin Scorsese film, one of my favorite directors. I talked about this movie in my top 10 as well, but basically the movie centers around this Native American tribe who has become very wealthy from oil money because their tribe is right above an oil reserve under the ground. Every member kind of collectively has a share of this oil, and when a family member dies, they kind of inherit their shares of the oil. So these two men played by, Leonardo DiCaprio and Robert De Niro kind of infiltrate this tribe, marry into it, and plan to kill a lot of this woman's family members so that they can inherit as much oil money as possible. It's a really good watch. There's great performances by Leonardo De Niro and the main wife character. It's a pretty fucked up movie. You kind of see how destroyed this woman is, and despite everything that happened, she still trusts her husband in the end and doesn't believe that he did any of these things, even though he gets convicted for all of these murders. Yeah, it's a crazy story. It's a true story, and I think everyone should watch this film. It's very well paced as well. It's like 3 hours or something, but it does not feel it. And I think it's a solid film. Moving on to our number 2 film. This one is an absolute masterpiece. American Fiction. This film opens, we see this black professor who is teaching a lecture on literature in the Confederate South, and he's giving a lecture on a book that has the word nigger in the title. One of the students, this white woman, is really upset that the word nigger is written on the board, and she tells the professor that he needs to be, as a black man, offended by this word and erase it off the whiteboard. And then she starts crying and storms out of the room as when he doesn't erase it from the whiteboard. And just from that scene, I knew I was going to be in for an absolute masterpiece of a movie. The film is kind of a satire on kind of black media, and especially kind of the way that white people kind of engage with black media, and how black creators are kind of incentivized to embrace a lot of these more stereotypical aspects of the black experience in order to profit. We follow this black character who is an author, but his books really don't have anything to do with race. They're just kind of normal fiction books, and they don't really sell very well. The film shows the black authors who do have success with their books, and their books are all kind of based around race and the black experience. They center around characters like living in the hood and doing drugs and being killed by the police and all this kind of stereotypical idea of a black experience. And the main character really doesn't like this. He thinks the general public is really only being given one image of what a black person is. So he writes this book that is embracing all these stereotypes to the nth degree. It's the most stereotypical black book possible. It's a kid in the hood addicted to crack, killed by police. He speaks in Ebonics, and he's writing this book essentially as a joke, kind of as a fuck you to audiences. But the general audiences don't realize that it's a joke. They eat this book up. And the more the main character tries to make it clear that this book is a joke, it just makes people like it even more. A big theme of the movie is kind of, white people trying to speak on behalf of black people, thinking they know what's best for black people. I mentioned the bit at the beginning of the movie, but there's also a bit where, the main character becomes a judge for the literary award of the year. This book that he wrote that is, this really stereotypical book is being considered for the best book of the year. He wrote it under a pseudonym, so they don't know that it's him. But there's these 3 white characters. They all love this book, and the main character and another black judge both hate the book. But then the white people tell them, I think we need to listen to minority voices, as they're actively shutting down, two black people's opinion. One of the highlights of the movie is the main character's interaction with this other character. This other character writes a lot of this kind of, types of books that the main character hates, these, stereotypical books. And he kind of confronts her on why she writes this type of stuff. She has a pretty interesting perspective on it. She says, I just write what the audiences want. I'm making whatever sells well. If white people conclude from my books that this is what all black people are like, that's on them. That's not really my problem. I thought it was a pretty interesting perspective. They kind of fleshed out sort of both of the sides. And yeah, it's a masterpiece film. Check it out. Also, the ending is great. It's probably one of the best endings of a movie I've ever seen. And yeah, moving on to our number one film of the year. It's, of course, Oppenheimer. Obviously, it's a cinematic masterpiece. The writing, the acting, the bomb, the dead Japanese people. It's a great film. I've kind of talked about this film in 3 videos now, so I'll keep it kind of brief, but Cillian Murphy's performance is excellent in the film. They really capture his kind of struggle with what he's created, this bomb. Yeah, I enjoyed the kind of non-linear storytelling of the film. I enjoyed Robert Downey Jr.'s performance as well. It's another one where it's, 3 hours long but feels like an hour. Yeah, it's just a absolute cinematic masterpiece and has cemented Christopher Nolan as one of the GOATs in my mind. I used to think, Quentin Tarantino and Scorsese were, the GOATs, and Nolan probably like down here. But this has cemented Nolan as one of the GOATs for me. So, yeah, that's my that's my rankings for the 2024 Oscars Best Pictures nominations. Let me know what your favorites were. Which one was your favorite? Which one was your least favorite? And I'll catch you in the next one.